On Reef Builders, I'm Jake Adams, and today we're going to have a little bit more of a vlog style video for you guys. As you know, we really try to keep things clean here in the Reef Builder studio because it's not just about keeping things clean, but about also keeping all of the important equipment running in tip-top shape. So for this video, we're really going to talk about the two calcium reactors that we have, and they're kind of interesting because we have opposite ends of the spectrum as far as like one of the most technical, elaborate calcium reactors probably on the market. That would be the Deltec Twintec, and one of the newest and simplest calcium reactors, the Aquavitro Element calcium reactor. So we're going to work on both of these as far as like resetting the media, cleaning them up, and making sure that everything is topped off and working in tip-top shape. But before we get started, man, I really want to give a big shout out to Felix. Felix is kind of a sister brand to Kessel. And without them, we could not be producing such high quality videos with incredibly great lighting. If you're an aspiring YouTuber, definitely get some extra lighting on whatever you're shooting, yourself, your tank, or your sump. But here in this case, you can see we're able to mount a small Felix P360 right above so we can show things off. It's very similar to the Kessel A360, not the A360X, but the old A360, very similar knobs. This is not a sponsored video from them, but as we were setting up videos setting up staging in different places, we're using Felix lights all over the place, and you know, they've been very supportive here at the studio, and I just want to give them a shout out. So thank you to Felix. So now I'm going to show you the more elaborate Deltec calcium reactor, and then I'll show you the Aquavitro Element, and we're going to take those apart and take them over to the workshop so we can clean them up and refill them. So this is the Deltec Twintec. I believe this is a CR10000. This is kind of the middle-sized one. I thought that this calcium reactor was filled up to here until I used a Neomag by Two Little Fishies to kind of clean this up. And once I cleaned off the algae, I realized that the calcium reactor was actually about half full. There's some insolubles that come in your calcium reactor media. So once we clean this out, it'll probably be about this much actual media. So this is the main calcium reactor from Deltec here, and then I added a secondary stage right here, and this is just filled with fine sand. So all the water from the calcium reactor comes down this line right here down to the bottom, and it passes through this chamber. But as you can see in this second chamber as well, we've lost a lot of media because that was filled pretty much to the brim. So we're going to need to reset the secondary chamber and then give this just a good cleaning, reset all this media, and clean up the gassing chamber right here as well as the float switch so we can see what's actually going on. All right, so on the other end of the spectrum, we have this Aquavitro Element M calcium reactor. You can see there's a lot of feather dusters that are just kind of growing in and on and around it. This is one of the most fundamental calcium reactors I think you can set up. Basically using a dosing pump here to continuously feed fresh tank water to the calcium reactor. And instead of having a pH probe on this guy, I have all the water coming out and going into a second chamber here, and I've been using basically a freshwater pH checker just to let me know that the water coming out here is acidic. So that's a nice little hack. But you can see that we've we've definitely gone down a little bit of media in there, and I have some really coarse calcium reactor media in there. You can't see it very well, but we're going to do a little swapperoonie with the coarse calcium reactor media that's in here. We're going to refill this with a little bit of finer stuff and then use this coarser stuff in the Twintec on the other side of the aisle. All right, so one of the cool things about the Aquavitro Element calcium reactor is instead of having to take the entire assembly apart and removing the whole thing in order to service the stuff, it's got a quick disconnect mechanism right here. Just clamp right there. Then this should pop right off. So it's tight, Come on. There we go. And then I'm able to just simply pull up this whole thing and then service it, refill it. You can see there's a lot of gaps, a lot of empty space, so this calcium reactor will definitely perform a lot better with more and finer media. is I just so happen to have an extra chamber right here that's already preloaded with a mixture of like fine media, a little bit of magnesium style media, and then also some coral frags, and it just hot swaps with the chamber that we just took out. So should be able to just pop that right in there, make sure it's seated properly, make sure these teeth are pointed up, right, these little grooves, because the other media reactors it's actually pointed the other way. And then we can just kind of put everything back in place, put the lid back on, get a nice firm seal, put the locking clamp back on there. All right, so we're gonna actually take apart these three components and just really give them like a good cleanup and servicing. I do want to stress that these calcium reactors, these styles right here that don't use a pH probe and use a saturation state, they're meant to be used with like a larger, denser calcium reactor media, which actually reduces how often you have to service the reactor, and they don't break down into the same kind of silt, and you can actually top them off through this particular port here. But I'm a little bit old school, still holding on to my aragonite ways, so we're gonna go start by draining part of the calcium reactor so it's not so freaking heavy. And they have these nice valves here that you can use for bleeding and priming different components of the guy. Let's see, I've got a valve right here for shutting off. So now this guy is isolated. Open this guy up. That will allow more of the water to get drained out. We're just gonna let this go for a few minutes just to reduce the overall weight of this guy. I think we can probably start disconnecting a few of the unions. The first time I saw this thing, I thought I was looking at a nuclear reactor, but once you put it together, it is about as fundamental as you'd expect from other calcium reactors. What we can do is I have this nifty little basket here that's hiding all the wires. Did my best to do some cable management and hide everything behind here, but you'll see this basket certainly looks a lot better than all those cables. So I'm gonna undo, let's see, my zip ties and my connections to the float valve and the water pump. This one, and then all right, so I'm just undoing a few of the thumb screws so I can get into this thing. This is just some random second stage I picked up used at an aquarium shop and then like painted it myself just to make it look a little bit more Reef Builders theme. Ooh, that last one is on tight. Let's see if I can get a good, there we go. So again, normally you probably could just top this off, but since I know this is filled with a lot of silt, I'm gonna go ahead and empty it, rinse it, and then we're gonna top it off with some general Carib Sea aragonite sand. That should do the job. There we go. That should about do it. But yeah, you can see how sludgy this is. You know what, actually now that I see it, I think I'm just gonna replace all of this because it's just so fine, it's just ready to turn into mush all over again. Okay, all right, so we got the second stage cleaned out, threw away all the old stuff, which was very fine and just kind of spongy. I feel that it is important for your second stage to have that fine sand so you can have the largest surface area possible to absorb as much CO2 before it goes back to the tank and decreases your pH. And man, definitely from refilling this thing, from installing this thing that first time and seeing just how much of that media dissolved, that's just a very highly visual indicator of how much the water got re-buffered before it was returned to the aquarium. All right, so Evan kind of brought up a good point of that I wasn't using calcium reactor media in the second stage, but I mean, as long as it's aragonite sand or aragonite in composition, the only difference you're really working with is particle size. So I think we got this guy all refreshed, nice and completed. So I'm just gonna set him aside. That's the easiest part. So we're gonna go check in on the Daltech Twin Tech and see how it's draining. All right, I think we've drained enough of this calcium reactor water out of here to actually safely handle it. You definitely don't want to handle this acrylic when it's full of water. It's just going to put too much pressure on some of the different parts. I think most everything is disconnected except for the water feed to the flow monitor. And this is the flow pump right here. So we're going to just stick you over there and we can disconnect everything. And like I said, I want to stress that this is not like very often that you have to do this with this calcium reactor or other calcium reactors, but this thing is a workhorse that is really supplying like 600 gallons of water just totally packed with coral. So we always want to make sure this is running in tip-top shape, so we never have any problems. All right, so I think this should be loose now. Easy peasy. This should be all isolated and ready to go. So one of the cool things about the Deltec Twin Tech is it has no thumb screws. You just basically use a pressure mechanism right here, just a twist lock, and you're off to the races, and everything else is pressure fitted. All right, as you can see, we've lost half of the calcium reactor media. It's all the way down, and there's like definitely like a layer of silt sludge here on the top. So one of the things that I like to do is I'm going to pour this all out, and I'm going to rinse it all off, all the fines, all the sludge. Let's go ahead and get the cleaning process started, and we'll see you guys on the other end. All right, so we have just about every single component taken apart, almost everything cleaned, but I want to show you one thing. The Deltec Twin Tech uses an actual feed pump, a very small controllable DC pump, and instead of like metering how much is going in, it uses a flow monitor to measure how much water is going into the calcium reactor. So no matter how clogged this gets, the flow meter will dictate how long this runs. So that's at the very beginning. We're going to give it like a light acid wash and then manually kind of clean it out. And then at the very end of the chain, this is something that's maybe a little bit unique to us. You already saw the secondary chamber, right? So this is what I call my degassing chamber. So this calcium reactor comes with a gassing chamber to add CO2 and keep it, at a very low pH, a saturation state of carbon dioxide. But I realized a long time ago that if you feed, even after your secondary chamber, your final chamber, you feed that into your sump, you have this, really mineral-rich water that as soon as it hits your calcium reactor or your return pump or both, the hot environment inside your needle wheel pump or your return pump creates a precipitate that creates wear and can cause premature failure. So we have a final chamber here. This is a degassing chamber, and I used to have an air stone in here to just help it degas a little bit more, but man, those things just always got clogged really quickly. So now I literally just let it sit in here because the Twin Tech is pulsed, right? So it pushes a bunch of water and then it stops for a little while depending on the setting. But you can see here, like all this crazy lime buildup from a chamber that is not even hot, that is just sitting there. You can see it all the way down there at the bottom, but especially right here where it's getting close to the water surface and it's able to degas. All of this normally would be going into your protein skimmer or building up on your return pump. So I feel like that's going to be something that calcium reactors users should really try to implement to make their return pumps and their protein skimmers not suffer from this buildup when it gets precipitated. All right, so where are we at here now? Okay, so this is the calcium reactor with all the media that was inside, all cleaned and rinsed. I think we lost maybe another inch or two because I did add the coarse calcium reactor media from the C-Chem calcium reactor. So I put all the really coarse stuff here so it can all percolate upwards really well. And a lot of people will ask, what are you using in your calcium reactor? To be honest, I've said this before, it doesn't really matter. If I used very fine sand, aragonite sand, I would get a ton of punch, but it would also clog very quickly. And at the other end of the spectrum, if you use the really coarse stuff, even coarser than this, you're gonna get a little less punch, I guess, like reactivity, because there's a lot less surface area, but you might go a really long time between servicing. So we totally boldly walk that line between, very fine, never use very fine sand, use a little bit coarser stuff like this right here, and this stuff. I will probably be gravitating towards the coarse stuff a lot more in the future, but honestly, this is just what I've like always had left over, right? I don't want to waste anything, so I always have a little bit of leftover. And Reborn has been like everybody's favorite calcium reactor media for 10-15 years. There was an interruption in supply. You might notice that this bag is a little bit brown and green. This is the old Reborn, and I consider it too precious now to melt down inside a calcium reactor. So I'm hoarding all my old Reborn for just a unique, creative, like rubble substrate in future tanks. So yeah, this is just like too cool to dissolve, in my opinion. You can do what you want with yours. So we are going to mix it up with some different calcium reactor medias that we have here. This is a little bit of the sort of fine stuff. I'm not going to go heavy on this. And this is Brightwell Neomag. You'll notice it has kind of a crystalline quality. It feels a little heavier, looks a little glassier, almost grayish, and you can see the pieces in here. This stuff lasts a long time. This is actually not aragonite, it's dolomite, so it has more magnesium. I think I've heard recommendations of using like, I don't know, 10 to 20% dolomite to get yourself a nice magnesium bump through your calcium reactor. Again, that's going to be up to personal preference. I find it really practical for us to use a good amount of dolomite, but then also just manually dose magnesium to the tank as needed. So we're going to add a good amount of this to the mix. All right, we have the main reaction chamber of the Daltech Twin Tech filled back up. Here you can see basically all the reused stuff. Here's that stripe of Brightwell Aquatics Neomag. So this is the dolomite-based magnesium. This might be a little bit more than some other people are comfortable with. And then this is the Coral Lazarus pure aragonite on top. But altogether, this should make a pretty good mix. So I think the last thing for us to do is just to clean up all the parts, put everything back together, and then show you the finished product. So hang tight and we'll come back around and show you the finished product. All right, so it's been maybe about a couple hours, but we got both calcium reactors completely serviced. And it's just so rewarding to have a machine like this that provides all the minerals and calcium and carbonates that these corals need pretty much like automatically. So I want to show off our completely cleaned calcium reactor. Once again, I do want to give a shout out to Philex. These guys these lights make it possible for us to like illuminate these tight shots. Absolutely not a sponsored post, but they have sponsored all the studio lighting here at the studio. So if you have a reef aquarium or any YouTube channel and you need some stage lighting, go ahead and hit up your rep from Kessel and they'll be able to set you up. So I want to show you just kind of the super cleaned up calcium reactors, and then we'll wrap it up. It's always just so like peaceful and soothing to see a completely serviced, clean calcium reactor. So the reason we don't fill it up completely here is there is an intake pipe right here that feeds the gassing chamber. But I'm just going to walk you through real quick how this works. We've got the feed pump there, totally out of focus, with a few different pre-filters, and that goes through a line down the back into the flow meter right here. This goes into the chamber. And then this pump right here, this speed controllable pump, actually circulates water between these two. This is the gassing chamber, and as it absorbs CO2, this flow switch will rise and it'll kick on the solenoid, just tucked right back here. And then as this entire thing fills up, it goes to the highest point right here. It's kind of like a little neck, a little tower pipe right here that you can take off and add media. And then this goes down into my DIY secondary chamber, which we topped off with fine sand. And then that comes out the top and goes into our degassing chamber. And you'll notice everything's a little bit cloudy because it's still cycling through, and it'll clear up within the next hour or two. All right, so now that we have the Aquavitro element calcium reactor all cleaned up, you can see a little bit more what's going on. So I'm going to walk you through what's happening here, and then just show you one little trick that we've started applying at the studio just to have like a dead simple calcium reactor operation. So the water comes in here through basically just a cheap $1 fuel filter that I've actually written about on Reef Builders before. You should have a pre-filter of any kind anytime your dosing pump is pulling live water from your aquarium. So this goes up here to the Versa dosing pump. I think this is set to 3.5 mLs per minute. And then that goes into the pump right here, the recirculation pump. And then this recirculates through this mixing chamber. It goes, kind of spins around the outside, and then down the top right there, and then back again. And as this becomes full, it comes out the top as well, and it goes into again another degassing post chamber, but I use this mostly to be able to easily measure pH. You can put a pH probe right here, but I don't want, you know, a pH probe getting so close to my water being in the sump. So here's the final little trick right there. You might have noticed this little yellow piece of glass. This is actually a Freshwater Ph Checker, and it has pH indicating solution inside. And when it's neutral, it'll be green. When it's alkaline, it'll be blue. And when it's acidic, it'll be yellow. So I basically just set the flow rate on the CO2 right there, the bubble rate, to keep it just barely within that yellow range right there. But I mean, this is like a like a $10 add-on maximum. And funny enough, I actually used the CChem solution. I used the checker that went inside before, and this is a random one that I bought off of Amazon. I think I found it. It was shipped from China. It took a while to get here, but it just hangs over the tank. And there's an open end right there you can see in the outlet or the effluent chamber right there. And so it just tells me when it's acidic. And the only thing I'm going to change here in the near future is I'm going to change the feed pump to be CChem's own Aquavitro Sentia dosing pump. So this will be a full-on CChem calcium and carbonate remineralization solution. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, just kind of following along some of the servicing and maintenance of a calcium reactor. If you've never used one before, it might seem a little bit complicated, but I assure you, once you get it going, it's no harder than a canister filter connected to itself. It's just a recirculating chamber, and there's a couple thin hoses going in and going out. One important detail that I really would like you viewers to take with you is that I don't use calcium reactors exclusively. I use a calcium reactor to take care of about 80 to 95% of the mineral demands, and then I generally use dosing to make those fine scale adjustments. So you shouldn't be tweaking your effluent rate up and down as needed to hit your desired levels of calcium and alkalinity. That's what a dosing pump really helps just kind of complement the entire system. So if you have any questions about calcium, alkalinity, calcium reactors, calcium reactor tricks, and pitfalls, etc., now's a great time to put those down in the comments, and make sure to like, comment, share, hit that notification bell, subscribe, and share with somebody who might want to, benefit from this information. Thank you so much for joining us on this video, and we'll catch you guys on another one very soon. Later, guys.